Hi, my name is Desiree Zamorano. I love mysteries, because where else can you find justice? But more than reading mysteries, what I really love is writing them. And my novel, Human Cargo, features Inez Leon, a Mexican-American, somebody I don't often see in the media, so I'm enjoying sharing this with you today. Human Cargo, Chapter 1. Never live in a home so removed, so remote, that the neighbors can't hear you scream. That was the mistake made by the Tates, the LaBiancas, and possibly Roland Hutchinson, a Forbes 400 member. That thought kept looping through my head as I eyed this crowd. Moneyed, educated, multi-hued, a Caltech event at the home of my benefactor that my on-again lover, Wallace, had dragged me to. I was annoyed. I could have been at my Krav Maga workout, practicing my elbow thrusts, my footwork, and finding those painful pressure points on my assailant. Instead, I was here in a dress borrowed from my sister, cunningly pinned at the bust, waist, and hips. Before we had left the home, Wallace had looked at me with that faraway gaze that implied unbridled lust, cleared his throat, and said, "I think we're going to have to be late." "Wallace, it took me and my sister a half hour to get this pin just right. If you take it off now, I'm never getting it back on." He mentally licked his lips. "That might be preferable," he said. "Fine, I really don't want to go to this thing anyway." The fog of desire lifted from his blue eyes. I could see it was a difficult decision. He shook his head and said, "Let's go." So they go to this fancy party, and Inez meets a prospective client who wants to hire Inez to find 3 Russian nationals. Inez knows nothing of the Russian national world. She realizes she needs an interpreter. So she gets a reference, and she meets this interpreter. In Pasadena, a few blocks from where I live, is a part of town unofficially known as Little Armenia. The bakeries are filled with Armenian pastries, restaurants serve shashlik, garlic chicken, and falafel. Armenians from Russia, Armenians from Lebanon. Occasionally you'll spot an older pedestrian crossing in the middle of the busy street, thinking it the old country, where cars were scarce and uncommon. A few blocks away, and yet I never shopped there. Too foreign, too exotic, too intimidating. This from the girl who can pull a gun out of an assailant's hand and pistol whip him with it. I stepped into the store. The receptionist had slick purple hair, lank bangs brushed past her brows. "I'm looking for Carol Levertov," I said. "You mean Kirill," she said. I shrugged. Whatever, I'm not a Russian native speaker. I veered toward a scattering of magazines on a low table, and when I looked back, there was a man hovering, looking down at me expectantly. He had an oval, clean-shaven face, gray eyes. His eyebrows were light brown, his hair cropped closely to his skull. This was the guy who put muscle in the muscle shirt. His shoulders looked almost as broad as he was tall, while his torso tapered into narrow, sturdy hips. He held out a hand. "I'm Kirill," he said. Holy smoke. I shook hands with the Russian version of The Rock. He tilted his slick head and said, "Let's talk in my office. Want a soda?" I shook my head. It didn't seem that words were coming out. Kirill had crammed a desk and himself into the space of a closet, leaving me little room. I stood in the doorway. On the gray walls were a number of calendars, each displaying February. "Neighborhood businesses," he said. "I don't like anyone feeling left out." He pushed a stool in my direction. "Sit," then poured us 2 glasses of fizzing bottled water. "I guess I was being sexist here," I said. "I was expecting a woman." Kirill nodded, knowingly, and said, "Yeah, kids in school made that mistake once." He sipped his water, burped, then nodded. Oddly, a burp coming from him didn't seem distasteful at all. It seemed rather earthy and physical, just like him. Holy smoke, I thought. Time to regroup. "You come pretty highly recommended," I said. "You speak English, Russian, and Armenian." He looked at me up and down swiftly. "My father, Russian, met my mother in Soviet Armenia, just another Eastern country with a rich, colorful, and tragic past and a corrupt present. So here I am. Oh yeah, I studied French in high school. Lebanese Armenians used to all speak that." Okay, so he was bigger than me, and he spoke 2 languages more than me. He continued. "Too much friction here in Pasadena between the Soviet and Lebanese Armenians, so they moved to Glendale." "What'd you want to talk about?" I said, "Glendale's the reason why I'm here. And I'd love you to find out more, and that's in my novel, Human Cargo." Thank you so much.